At the heart of our deepest emotional struggles lies a simple but powerful truth. We often don't feel loved, not because love is missing, but because we've forgotten how to truly receive it. From childhood wounds to complex inner beliefs, from the personas we wear to the pain we repeat, so much of our suffering stems from a fractured sense of self. Carl Jung taught us that healing is not about chasing perfection or finding someone to complete us. It's about looking inward, facing the hidden pain, and reclaiming the parts of ourselves we left behind just to survive. Love will always feel distant if we continue to approach it through fear masks and unhealed patterns. But when we turn toward our inner child with compassion, when we see the core wound, I am not lovable, and begin to gently challenge it, something begins to shift. We stop seeking worth in the eyes of others and begin to recognize the sacredness of simply being who we are. Healing through inner wholeness means embracing in all of ourselves not just the parts that feel strong or admirable, but the vulnerable, messy, afraid parts too. When we do love, no longer becomes something we need to earn. It becomes something we finally feel. And in that quiet recognition, we no longer beg for love, we embody it. This journey is not easy, but it is real, and it is possible. The path to feeling truly loved begins with one brave step inward toward the person you have always been patiently waiting, beneath the pain, hoping to be seen again. We're taught that love should be the warmest, safest place, that being loved will finally make us feel whole. But for so many of us, love doesn't feel like that. It feels distant, unstable, like something you can touch for a second but never hold on to. And sometimes the more someone loves you, the more uncomfortable you feel. You pull away, you doubt their intentions, you keep waiting for the moment they'll change their mind. Why? Because somewhere deep in your past, you learned that love wasn't safe. Maybe it was a parent who only showed affection when you were quiet, polite, or successful. Maybe it was a caregiver who was emotionally absent, unpredictable, or shaming. Whatever the story, the message that got planted inside you was this: love is conditional. I have to earn it. And so that became your emotional blueprint. You became someone who tries hard, who pleases others, who hides their true feelings just to avoid being left. And even now as an adult, when someone offers you genuine care, that old wiring activates. Your nervous system doesn't feel relaxed. It feels alert, guarded, suspicious. You don't consciously reject love, but the part of you that had to survive without it does. Carl Jung believed these patterns live in the unconscious, shaping every relationship silently from beneath the surface. So when love doesn't feel safe, it's not about the person in front of you. It's about the wound behind you, the old memory your body carries even when your mind forgets. And until you face that, until you recognize that your discomfort with love isn't a flaw but a defense, it will keep repeating. No amount of affection will satisfy what was never emotionally safe to begin with. This is where the healing begins, not in searching for someone to finally love you perfectly, but in understanding why love has always felt just out of reach. Love in its purest form should feel like acceptance, warm, unwavering, and safe. But for many of us, love has never felt like that. Instead, it feels like something we must earn, something that can be taken away the moment we stop being good enough. Deep down, a quiet fear takes root. If I'm not perfect, I won't be loved. This belief often begins in childhood, not necessarily through cruelty, but through subtle emotional patterns. Perhaps a parent became cold when you expressed anger or sadness. Maybe you were praised only when you performed well, stayed quiet, or made others proud. Over time, you internalized a dangerous message: love is not for who I am, it's for how I behave. And so began the performance. You learned to wear a smile when you were breaking inside. You learned to say, I'm fine instead of I'm hurting. You became the version of yourself that others could approve of. But in doing so, you abandoned your truth, your vulnerability, your needs, your authenticity. Carl Jung referred to this process as the creation of the persona, a psychological mask we wear to be accepted in society. But when we become too identified with this mask, love starts feeling conditional because we know, even if unconsciously, that the person being loved is not our whole self. This is why compliments feel hollow, why affection doesn't land, because the part of you that feels unlovable was never invited to the table. That hidden part still believes if they really knew me, they'd leave. To heal this, we must stop trying to be lovable and start daring to be real. True love isn't found in perfection, it's found in presence. In allowing someone to see not just your strengths, but your scars. Because love that's earned is never truly received. But love that meets you in your wholeness, that changes everything. Have you ever noticed how a single word glance or moment can suddenly trigger an overwhelming wave of emotion, far more intense than the situation seems to deserve? That's not overreaction. That's a complex, a buried emotional charge from the past awakened in the present. Carl Jung believed that within our unconscious mind live these psychological knots called complexes. They are not just memories, but living emotional realities formed around wounds that never fully healed. They carry the beliefs, fears, and patterns we developed in response to emotional pain, especially in childhood, when we were most vulnerable and most in need of unconditional love. One of the most powerful and devastating complexes is the love wound. It forms when a child's basic emotional needs to be seen, held, accepted, are unmet, inconsistent, or given only under conditions. That child then grows up believing I am not enough as I am. And that belief doesn't stay in childhood. It grows with you, hides in the background, and colors every adult relationship you enter. So when someone compliments you, your complex whispers they don't mean it. When someone tries to get close, it says they'll eventually leave. And when someone actually loves you deeply, sincerely, the complex makes you doubt, push away, or even sabotage it. Not because you don't want love, but because love feels like danger, not safety. Jung emphasized that these complexes operate autonomously, meaning they act on their own beneath your conscious awareness. They hijack your behavior, distort your perception, and recreate familiar emotional patterns. Not because you choose it, but because your psyche is trying in its own wounded way to resolve what was left unresolved. This is why the past keeps repeating. Why you date people who resemble your emotionally unavailable parent. Why conflict feels more familiar than calm. Because your complex is still trying to rewrite the original story, hoping for a different ending, but always trapped in the same beginning. Healing a complex doesn't mean erasing the past. It means becoming aware of how the past lives within you and beginning to respond with compassion instead of automatic reaction. When you notice the voice that says, "You're not lovable," and answer, "I hear you, but you're wrong," that's a moment of transformation. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But once you see the complex clearly, you no longer have to live as its puppet. You become its witness. And from that witnessing begins a long, courageous return to your true self, the self who was always worthy of love, just as they are." Somewhere along the way, many of us learned a silent rule: to be loved, you must not be fully yourself. So we adapted. We smiled when we were hurting. We stayed quiet when we wanted to scream. We became easy-pleasing, accommodating, not because it was our nature, but because it was safer than rejection. And so a mask was born. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the socially acceptable version of ourselves that we create to navigate the world. The persona is not a lie, but it is incomplete. It's a carefully curated self shaped by what we believe others will accept and love. But here's the tragedy. The more we polish the mask, the more we bury the raw, honest parts of who we truly are. The need to wear a mask often begins in childhood. Maybe your anger was met with punishment, your sadness with indifference, your authenticity with shame. So you learn to hide those parts to protect yourself. And it worked. You survived. You were praised for being good, quiet, easy, but inside a subtle fracture formed. Because deep down you knew, they don't love the real me, just the version I perform. This is why even in love we often feel unseen. Someone can say, "I love you," but if they've only met your persona, the agreeable, resilient smile on the surface the love doesn't quite land. It bounces off the surface because the part of you that aches to be loved is still hidden in the dark. And the more love you receive while wearing the mask, the more you may feel like a fraud thinking, if they knew who I really was, they wouldn't stay. But here's the deeper truth Jung pointed to. The persona is only a tool. It's meant to help us function, not define us. When we cling to it too tightly, we lose connection not only with others, but with ourselves. Behind the mask lives the shadow, the repressed, messy, emotional, beautiful parts of you that have longed for air. And within the shadow lies your authentic self. Real healing begins when we start peeling away the persona gently, bravely, and begin showing up as our whole self. Not just the polished, likable parts, but also the confused, imperfect, deeply human ones. Because only when you risk being fully seen can you receive love that is fully real. To love without the mask is terrifying, yes, but to keep the mask on forever is even more painful. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you can only become that person when you take the risk to let the real you be seen and loved. At the heart of every longing, every ache for love that feels unreachable, there is a voice, small, quiet, often ignored. It belongs to the inner child, the part of you that once knew how to feel without shame, how to ask for love, without fear, how to simply be without needing to earn worth. But something happened. Perhaps it wasn't a single traumatic event, but 1,000 small moments. A caregiver's disapproving glance, an unmet cry, a need dismissed as too much. Slowly you began to believe a lie that burrowed its way into your soul. I am not lovable as I am. Carl Jung spoke of the inner child not as a sentimental idea, but as a living presence within the psyche, a part of us that remembers, that holds the emotional imprints of our earliest years. When this child is wounded, neglected, criticized, emotionally abandoned, it doesn't just forget how to trust love, it forgets how to trust itself. This wound becomes the core belief that shapes our entire adult life. We grow up, we find partners, we try to love and be loved, but that wound keeps whispering beneath it all. You have to be better to be worthy. You have to do more. You have to shrink yourself to fit. And so we hustle for worth. We chase people who won't stay. We sabotage the ones who try. Not because we don't want love, but because love feels unfamiliar, even dangerous to the wounded child within. You may wonder why you push people away, why you can't receive kindness without suspicion, why compliments make you uncomfortable. It's not weakness. It's the inner child trying to protect you from being hurt again, from reliving the heartbreak of feeling unseen, unwanted, not enough. But healing begins the moment you turn inward and listen. When you stop silencing the pain and finally say, I see you. You didn't deserve what happened. You were always enough. That is the beginning of wholeness. This is not about blaming your past. It's about reclaiming the part of you that got left behind in it. The inner child doesn't need perfection. It doesn't need you to fix everything. It just needs your presence, your acceptance, your love. Because when you love that child, when you make space for its voice and pain and joy, you begin to undo the lie. You begin to tell a new truth. I am lovable as I am. And that truth, whispered often enough, believed deeply enough, begins to change everything. It softens your defenses. It opens your heart. It lets love in not as something to be earned, but as something you were always worthy of. At the root of so many of our struggles, our loneliness, our self-sabotage, our hunger for validation, there lies a quiet, devastating belief I am not lovable. It's not always spoken. It's not even always conscious. But it lives in the body. It colors the way we see ourselves, how we interpret kindness, how we respond to love. This wound doesn't come from adult relationships. It forms much earlier in the tender, unguarded years of childhood. In the moments when we cried and no one came, when we were scolded for feeling too much, when love was only offered in exchange for obedience, perfection, or silence, slowly a child learns the real me is too much. I must shrink to be accepted. And so the wound begins. The tragedy is this belief shapes everything. If I believe I am not lovable as I am, I will chase love while doubting it. I will push people away before they can reject me. I will perform please or pretend, hoping someone will finally convince me I'm enough. But even when love arrives, it doesn't reach me. Because deep down, I've already decided I don't deserve it. Carl Jung understood that these early emotional injuries become unconscious complexes, patterns of thought and behavior that distort our reality. The unlovable complex is especially cruel because it blocks the very thing we most long for. It causes us to question sincerity, misread intention, and fear intimacy. We become prisoners of our own disbelief. But here is the truth. The wound is not the truth. It is a story we internalize to make sense of a world that didn't know how to hold us. And it can be rewritten not through others convincing us we are lovable, but through us gently, bravely learning to believe it ourselves. Healing this wound means returning to the part of us that was silenced, the child who still waits inside. We don't heal by erasing the past, but by offering that forgotten self what it never received: unconditional presence, compassion, and love. Because the real question isn't whether others love you. It's whether you are willing to love the part of yourself that once believed no one could. Why do we keep choosing the same kind of pain over and over again, even when we know it hurts? Why do we fall for people who abandon us, trust those who belittle us, or give our all to those who cannot give anything back? It seems illogical, even self-destructive. But Carl Jung, along with other depth psychologists, understood this painful loop as something much deeper than bad luck or poor choices. He called it the repetition compulsion, the unconscious urge to recreate old emotional wounds in hopes of finally healing them. As children, we didn't just experience love, we were shaped by it, or more often by the lack of it. If our love was met with neglect, unpredictability, or criticism, we internalize that as normal. And in adulthood, without realizing it, we seek out that same emotional climate, not because we want to suffer, but because a part of us is still trying to finish a story that never ended right. This is how the repetition compulsion works. We are drawn to what is familiar, not what is healthy. We mistake intensity for intimacy. We confuse pain for passion. And we repeat the same patterns with different people each time, secretly hoping, maybe this time they'll stay. Maybe this time I'll be enough. But the wound isn't out there to be fixed. It's inside. And no matter how many times we rewrite the scene, we cannot heal by casting the same role over and over again. True healing only begins when we recognize that the original pain was never our fault, but the cycle now is our responsibility. When we become aware of this compulsion, we gain a chance to pause, to ask, what part of me is trying to be heard here? It's often the inner child still aching for the love it didn't receive, still hoping that someone someday will make it right. But it won't be someone else, it will be you. Only when we stop reenacting the past and start repairing the present do we step out of the loop. And in that moment, we don't just break the pattern, we reclaim our power, because we were never meant to repeat pain. We were meant to transform it. Healing does not begin with someone else loving you better. It begins the moment you decide to stop abandoning yourself. For most of us, love has always come at a price of being good, quiet, impressive, pleasing. We've spent years fragmenting ourselves into pieces: the version that's acceptable, the one that keeps the peace, the one that's strong even when it's breaking inside. We wear these masks for so long that we forget there was ever a self beneath them. But the ache remains. That quiet, lingering emptiness that no relationship, success, or validation can truly fill. Carl Jung believed that true healing arises from integration, not perfection, not achievement, but the brave act of becoming whole again. It means returning to the parts of ourselves we've silenced: the angry child, the grieving heart, the terrified soul. It means welcoming back what we once pushed away because we were told it was too much, too messy, or unlovable. This is not easy work. It asks us to sit with pain instead of distracting from it. It requires us to meet ourselves in our rawest truth and whisper, I'm still here. You're not too broken. You never were. When we begin to offer ourselves the love we've always longed for from others, unconditional, patient, tender, something miraculous happens. We no longer chase love. We become it. We stop seeking healing in someone else's arms because we found it in our own. Wholeness is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to hide. It's about choosing to see your own worth, even in your most unguarded, imperfect state. Because that is where love truly lives, not in the flawless mask, but in the full, authentic self that has been waiting to be welcomed home. And when you love yourself in that way, truly fiercely, without conditions, you create a foundation that no rejection can shake. You begin to receive love, not as proof of your value, but as a reflection of it. This is what healing looks like. Not a destination, but a reunion. A coming home to yourself. A slow, sacred return to your inner wholeness.